Welcome back to the deep dive, everybody. Today, we are going to be diving into some really dark stuff. And I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, we've done some dark dives in the past,
Yeah,
and this one I think is going to be up there.
absolutely. I'm particularly interested because we've got this article here that I found called "The Most Painful Deaths in History: Worst Executions Ever" from the Infographics Show,
Hmm.
and it covers both deaths caused by humans, like executions and that kind of thing, as well as deaths caused by nature.
So, this is obviously a heavy topic.
Right.
We're talking about some seriously gruesome stuff. But as we often do in these deep dives, we're not just here to gawk at the gore.
No, we're not.
We're going to try to dig a little deeper and see if we can understand the historical context, like the motivations, behind these events. What does all this tell us about human nature?
Right. I mean, how far have we come as a species? Have we moved beyond some of this stuff, or are we still capable of the same level of, I don't know, cruelty?
And this deep dive, this conversation could offer the listener a very unique perspective on history through a very specific lens, of course.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. This article starts off with a bang. I mean, it throws you right into the deep end with the story of this guy Balthazar Gerard. Back in 1584, he was responsible for assassinating William the Silent.
Oh, wow. Okay, so who is this William the Silent guy?
Well, he was like a really important figure in the Dutch revolt against Spain. He's actually considered like the father of the Netherlands.
Okay.
Yeah, and Girard's assassination of him was actually the first recorded political assassination using a firearm.
Oh, wow. That's significant. That changes the game entirely.
It does. But Girard's actions had some pretty horrific consequences for him.
Mhm.
After he was captured, he was subjected to 4 straight days of torture. I mean, can you imagine?
4 days. Oh, my God. What did they do to him?
They beat him and they deliberately kept him from sleeping. I mean, just the thought of it is, it's pretty awful.
Ugh. Yeah, it's psychological torture on top of the physical torture.
It is. It's like they wanted to completely break him, not just get information or a confession or something like that, but like truly just destroy him as a person.
Yeah, it's like they wanted to make him suffer for every second that he was alive.
Yeah.
Make an example out of him.
And then the execution itself, they cut off his right hand, which, I mean, it seems pretty symbolic considering that was the hand that pulled the trigger, right?
Yeah, like they're not just taking his life, they're trying to undo his actions in this really brutal and symbolic way.
Yeah. And it just kind of sets the stage for the rest of the article. It makes you realize that we're about to really look at how humans have justified and enacted cruelty.
Yeah. And it's not just about the act itself, it's about the message it sends. Like, hey, look what we're capable of doing to you if you step out of line.
Right. And it gets you thinking about how our ideas of justice have evolved, or maybe haven't evolved as much as we'd like to think.
Right. Are we really that much more civilized now than we were back then?
It's a good question. Okay, so the article then kind of takes a left turn, and we go from human cruelty to something completely different. It talks about Timothy Treadwell.
Who's that?
Do you remember him? He was that guy who lived among grizzly bears in Alaska. He was a bit of a controversial figure.
Oh, yeah, yeah. He was kind of like that bear whisperer guy, right?
Yeah, kind of. But his story doesn't end well. He and his girlfriend were killed by a grizzly bear in 2003.
Oh, wow. So it wasn't like an execution or anything like that. It was just, nature taking its course.
Yeah, I mean, it was during a season when salmon were scarce, so the bear was probably just really hungry.
Right. Just doing what I had to do to survive.
Yeah. And there's actually an audio recording of the attack. I haven't listened to it, and I don't think I want to.
Oh, God, no. I'm not sure I could stomach that.
But it just kind of shows the raw power and unpredictability of nature.
Yeah. And it makes you think about how we make sense of pain and death when it's caused by an animal versus when it's caused by another human.
Right. Right. Because with Treadwell, it wasn't like this calculated symbolic thing. It was just, like you said, survival.
Right. Instinct, a biological imperative. But with human executions, there's this whole other layer of meaning and intention.
Yeah, it's like humans are capable of cruelty on a whole different level.
Not to say that nature can't be cruel, but it's different.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so the article then goes back to human-inflicted pain, and it talks about this really gruesome execution of György Dasa in Hungary back in 1514.
Okay. Who was this guy?
Well, he was a peasant leader who led a rebellion against the Hungarian nobility.
Oh, okay, so another guy who challenged the powers that be, what happened to him?
Well, let's just say they didn't take too kindly to his rebellion. They came up with this incredibly cruel and symbolic way to execute him.
Symbolic, how so?
They basically made a mockery of his leadership. They made this iron throne and heated it until it was red hot.
Oh my God, that's just barbaric.
Then they forced him to sit on it. And to make it even worse, they put this red-hot iron crown on his head and gave him a heated scepter to hold.
Oh my God. I mean, you can almost hear the screams, right?
Yeah. And it wasn't just about the pain. It was about the humiliation, the public spectacle of it all. They wanted to show everyone what happens to those who dare to challenge their authority.
Yeah. It's like they were saying, look, this is what we do to kings who try to rise up against us.
Exactly. But it gets even worse. After Dosa was dead, they forced his captured followers to eat his charred remains.
What? Are you serious? They made them eat his body?
Yeah, under threat of death, of course. It's almost too horrific to comprehend.
I can't eat. I mean, it's a whole other level of messed up.
It is, and it just goes to show the lengths that those in power will go to maintain control. They weren't content with just killing Dosa. They wanted to completely obliterate him, erase him from history, and terrify anyone who might even think about following in his footsteps.
Right. It's like they were trying to send this message that even in death, you're not safe from us. We can still humiliate you, defile your body, and force your followers to participate in your destruction.
It's truly chilling. Okay, so the article then takes us to China, and it talks about this execution method called lingqi.
Lingxi. What's that?
It's often translated as death by 1,000 cuts, which is pretty descriptive. Basically, they would just slowly slice the person to death over an extended period of time.
Oh, God. I mean, we're talking about torture at this point, right? Not just execution.
Oh, absolutely. It was all about inflicting the maximum amount of pain and suffering, and it was used for centuries, from the 10th century all the way up to 1905.
1905. That's incredibly recent.
It is. I mean, just think about that. This was still happening within the last, 150 years.
It's mind-boggling. And how long would these executions last?
Well, the article gives this example of General Yuan Chengwan, who was accused of treason. They apparently subjected him to lynching for half a day.
Half a day. Oh, my God. Imagine being cut, slowly cut, for 12 hours straight. The pain must have been unimaginable.
It's hard to even fathom. And it wasn't just about killing him. It was about making a spectacle of it, showing everyone the price of betrayal and making sure no one else even thought about stepping out of line.
Right. Like, this is what happens to traitors. Don't even think about it.
Exactly. And lynching was just one of the many ways they punish people in ancient China. The article talks about these 5 punishments, which were basically a whole system of inflicting pain and marking people in society.
So it's not just death. They had this whole system of what? Torture and humiliation.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
They had tattooing, which was like a permanent mark of shame.
Like a branding.
Yeah, kind of. Then they had mutilation, like cutting off noses or amputating feet.
Oh, wow. I mean, talk about taking an eye for an eye. That's pretty brutal.
Yeah. And they also had emasculation, which was obviously a very severe punishment, especially back then.
Yeah, you're basically removing someone's manhood and their ability to have children. That's like social death on top of everything else.
Right. And then, of course, they had execution, which could take many forms, but it was always brutal.
So they basically had this whole toolkit of pain and suffering that they could use to punish people.
It's really quite disturbing. And the article talks about this one guy, Lei, who was a politician during the Qin dynasty. He apparently suffered all 5 punishments.
All 5. Oh, my God. I mean, can you even imagine going through all of that?
It's unimaginable to survive the tattooing, the mutilation, the amputation, the emasculation, and then still have to face execution.
Yeah, that's not just punishment. That's like some kind of twisted endurance test.
It is. And his final execution was being sawn in half. I mean, can you even... Oh, God. I mean, the pain, I can't even...
And as they were sawing him in half, he apparently whispered his last words to his son.
Oh, my God. That's just heartbreaking. Even in the face of such unimaginable suffering, he's still thinking about his family.
It's a powerful reminder that even in these horrific historical accounts, there's still that human element, the capacity for love, for connection, even in the face of death.
Yeah, like a little flicker of hope in all this darkness.
Right. Okay, so moving on, the article talks about another pretty gruesome execution, this time in Morocco. It involves Sultan Ismail ibn Sharif and his revenge on this governor named Melik.
Okay. And what did this sultan do to get his revenge?
Well, he had Milik sawn in half, but not just any sawing. They started from the head and went down.
Oh my God, that's just, I mean, is there any way to saw someone in half that's not horrific?
I don't think so.
Right.
But this particular method, it's like they wanted to make it as gruesome as possible, and they did it in front of 4,000 people. 4,000 people. Oh, wow. So it was a public spectacle. This wasn't just about killing Melik. It was about sending a message.
Exactly. It was a show of power, a warning to anyone who might even think about challenging the sultan's authority.
Yeah. Like, look, this is what happens if you cross me. I will literally saw you in half.
The article calls it gruesome creativity, which is, I think that's a pretty apt description.
Yeah, it's like they were taking pride in the cruelty, putting on a show.
It's disturbing, right? Like, how can humans be so creative when it comes to inflicting pain?
It's a question that haunts me. I mean, we're capable of so much good, but also so much evil.
So as we're kind of wrapping up this deep dive into some of the darkest corners of history, the article points out a few overarching themes. And I think one of the most obvious ones is just the sheer ingenuity humans have when it comes to devising ways to kill each other.
Yeah. It's like we can be so inventive, so clever, but we often use that intelligence for terrible things. It's like a dark side of human creativity.
And it's not just limited to one culture or time period, it's everywhere. Throughout history, humans have found ways to make death as painful and horrific as possible.
Yeah. It makes you wonder if it's just something inherent in us. Like, is there some dark part of our nature that just revels in cruelty?
It's definitely a disturbing thought. Another theme that the article highlights is the symbolism that's often attached to these executions. Like, it's not just about killing the person, it's about sending a message, humiliating them, making an example of them.
Right. Like with Dasa and that mock coronation. It wasn't enough to just execute him. They had to make a spectacle of it, turn it into this grotesque performance designed to reinforce their power and terrify anyone who might question it.
And it's like that with so many of these executions. They're not just about ending a life, they're about controlling the narrative, shaping how people perceive power and justice.
Yeah. And it's interesting how that symbolism can shift depending on the culture and the time period. Like what's considered a humiliating or terrifying death in one place might be completely different in another.
Right, it's all about context, but it's always about power. And then, of course, you have the contrast with Timothy Treadwell and his death by grizzly bear.
Yeah. That really throws a wrench into the whole thing, doesn't it? Because there's no symbolism there, no human intent, just raw, unadulterated nature.
Yeah. It's a reminder that the world can be a brutal place, even without human intervention.
Right. But it's also a reminder that human cruelty is often different. We add this layer of intentionality, of symbolism, of, I don't know, sadism.
Yeah, it's like we take cruelty to a whole other level.
Which I guess brings us back to our original question. What do these stories, these horrific accounts of death and execution, tell us about ourselves? About our capacity for both good and evil?
It's a tough question, and I don't know if there's an easy answer, but I think it's a question we need to keep asking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it.
Yeah. So as we leave you to ponder these dark and disturbing tales, we want to leave you with one final thought. What do these historical extremes tell us about our own humanity? About the ongoing evolution, or maybe the lack thereof, of our ideas about justice and punishment? It's a question worth pondering, and maybe it'll even inspire you to do some research on your own, delve deeper into the specific cases and the historical context surrounding them. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.